is a general discussion about mental health. It is not to be interpreted as specific advice for a specific situation. Every situation is unique and requires advice to be tailored and adapted to that situation. All information in this broadcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional mental health services. If you or a loved one are experiencing mental health distress, please speak to a licensed professional in your area.
It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change. Living well. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. Living well. It's not too late to change. It's time to be the change.
Living well takes a community. So remember to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share with a friend. Welcome to another episode of Living Well, where we attend to the mind, the heart, the body, and the soul. I'm your host, Dr. Erica Holmes, and I want to welcome you in today. We have a very special guest for you, and we will be talking about some things that might be difficult for you to hear. We're going to talk about the you in relationships, and really putting a focus on you, what you do, what you don't do, what you need to do, and what needs to be healed. Sometimes we don't want to talk about that, but it is so important for us to move forward and find what our guest calls the perfect fit. So grab a pen, grab a little light beverage, and grab or text to call a friend to join you as you watch this episode of Living Well. All right, good people. It is time for the water cooler conversation. You know, this is the time that we come out of our offices, gather around the water cooler, and talk about a topic, something that's hot, something that's hip, something that's going around on social media, or something that we think you need to know a little bit more about. So we always started off with a video, as you know, and then we talk about it on the other side. So this is what we found for you today. Let's take a look.
The thing about therapy, we just got to go ahead and call it what it is, call a spade a spade. That in the Black community, therapy is still it's that little thing we don't talk about. Mm-hmm. We don't do. We still feel like, oh, you got the devil in you. Oh, just pray, it'll be all right. And sometimes you need Jesus and your meds. Real talk. And we don't say that about high blood pressure. Yeah. We don't say it about heart conditions. We don't say about anything else. Everything else we say go to the doctor. But when it comes to mental health, our wellness, our whole beings, it's one of those things that it's still the stigma. And in the Black community, if people find out you seen a psychiatrist, something wrong with you. But if you take that back, we all had that special uncle. We all had that uncle or that cousin. We knew they were off, but nobody pushed the issue. Nobody got them help. Yeah. And so if we want to break those cycles in our families, like, we've been to therapy individually. We went as a couple. Your original question of where did it start? We were at a bad place.
All right. So what he said, you need therapy.
You need Jesus and your man.
That's right.
That's exactly. And we have been talking about mental health and the stigma and the importance of being able to take care of our mental health. And he could not have been more on the point, if you will, especially because we want to pray everything away. We love Jesus all day long.
All day and all night.
All day and all night. However, we have to do more than just say, okay, there's a part that Jesus can do, and then there's a part that we can do. And that's what I love. The message is we have to do our part too.
And what we have to understand and recognize is mental health challenges is not just a disorder, diagnosable disorder, or something severe. Right. It's not just, I'm hearing voices, or I'm seeing things, or and those things happen. Mm-hmm. Those things happen. Or I can't get out of bed. Those things happen. Mm-hmm. But also some challenges that we might be struggling with might be low self-esteem, how I feel about myself.
Right.
I might have difficulty in conflict or managing conflict. I might have problems talking about or asking for what I need or what I want. I might have some experiences that I'm carrying from my childhood. Mm-hmm. And we don't recognize that when you're struggling in those areas, it not only impacts you, but it impacts those that you're in relationship with.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a romantic or intimate relationship, or a friendship, or a parenting relationship with your child, or your parents or your siblings, that others are affected. You might not be doing anything
Right.
to them, but you're not able to give your full self in that relationship. At minimum, you're not able to show up 100% authentically who you are in the relationship.
Exactly. And that's so important to be aware of us, because a lot of us are just moving and, just moving, going back and forth to and fro, not really paying attention to how we are showing up or how we are not showing up. And I also think that it's important for us we've talked about this so many times on this show. It's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
And when you're not okay, say something.
Right.
You have to be able, you can pray, most definitely. And as we say, pray and say something. You might have to run this by somebody, seek a therapist, talk to someone. And we just need to do better about moving away from this stigma.
Yes.
Because that's what we're dealing with. Moving away from the stigma that, hey, I'm struggling today. And like he said, we're in a bad place. We need to go talk to somebody because we can't do this by ourselves.
Right.
So I think that's the important piece.
Right. Hey, I'm struggling today, and I want to have more understanding of me and who I am and what makes me me. And a good therapist can help you to do that, to explore it, can enhance your life, even help you with decision making if you don't know which way that you want to go. And it can help uncover maybe some of the challenges that you've had in your life and you didn't know why you've experienced certain challenges, why certain friendships or relationships ended the way that they did, how past trauma has impacted your life. I remember there was a slogan from back in the day, do it for yourself and do it for the ones you love. Yes. That's it. Do it for yourself and do it for the ones you love. I think that's a great place to stop this conversation. As you can see, the theme throughout this conversation is get the help that you need. It'll be better for you and it'll be better for the relationships that you're attempting to have. That leads us into our dynamic segment today. We have a wonderful guest who works in the area of trauma and relationships. Dr. Akin Merino will be joining us. Stay with us. Here we go. All right, family, I told you we are in for a treat. I have my dear friend and colleague here, Dr. Akin Merino. Thank you so much for joining us on the Living Well stage. This is your first time, right? You're new to this, but not new to the field. You've been in mental health for over 20 years, specializing in trauma and relationships and all those things that are good and that we need to know. And you do it all on a foundation of God.
Amen.
We could not have a more perfect guest to talk about intimacy and trauma and relationships and the perfect fit.
Yes.
So start off by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your career and what you do.
Thank you for having me here, and I'm so glad to be at this place today. This is the day the Lord has made.
Yes,
so thank God for that. Well, I have been, I'm a professor of psychology.
Yes.
So I teach that. I've been doing that for over 2 decades. And also I'm a mental health commissioner for the county of San Bernardino.
Okay.
I'm a psychologist, but I'm a trauma specialist.
Okay.
In that I believe that education is healing. And so what I've done is I've traveled across the globe really, but mostly focusing on Africa and just bringing awareness and working with different governments on how we can implement mental health and wellness into their legislation. Because most of us just don't have it in the different countries. I just came back from East Africa a few months ago, and we started from Israel, not in Africa, but that was my birthday. So we did Israel, and then we went to Egypt, Kenya, Tanzania, and I'm missing a country that we went to, and just really working with different countries on how they can be well, because mental health is a country's wealth. So it's important.
I like that.
And it is important to know that God created all of this.
Yeah.
This is not a mental health and faith. There is intersections, and God created it all. And so we just decide that, you know, when I went, I was in Nigeria. I'm originally from Nigeria, and I was in Nigeria about 7 years ago, and I just I saw the need. So I thought it's time to go and give back.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work here too in the United States. We have the Black Women Congress that we run, and we, you know, bring business people, leaders together, and actually make them mentors for high school students or middle school students who want to be mentored in any way. So that's some of the things that we do.
Wow.
I also write. I also write.
Yeah.
I'm a writer. I just released my first fiction, so that's exciting for me.
Wow. And that's a great segue, because your first fictional novel is really built on the principles, right, of the work that you're doing and one of your current thrusts.
Yes.
So why don't you, by bringing the book,
Yes.
right, tell us what you're kind of focused on and what you want our viewers to kind of be aware of.
Look, in all of the travels, one of the things that I've found is that relationships is where it's all at. Everything is about relationships. I was at the county with the county superintendent of schools in February for Black History Month, and they were talking about education and Black students and all of this. And I was telling them, I said, when students don't feel a sense of connectiveness, they are not going to learn.
Right.
So even education is about relationships.
Yes.
Everything is about relationships. When God created us, He didn't create just one person.
Right.
He made a partner for that person.
Right. Right.
And so perfect fit is the
perfect
model.
fit, okay.
So when we talk about perfect fit, people think we're talking about two perfect people. We're not talking about two perfect people. That's impossible, because we all know we're imperfect beings, right? But perfect fit is about a key and a lock. The lock is imperfect, the key is imperfect, but they fit, right? And so it's this whole idea that God has created someone for you. Because when we did all of the studies for the Perfect Fit book, we just started looking at all the statistics. Do you know there are countries where 70%, they have a 70% divorce rate? 70%.
Wow.
That's huge. And so, I kind of meditating on this and doing a lot of research and praying about it. And like, what is the key? There's something we're missing. Right? Because I don't think you can just go off a shelf and pull somebody and say, this is my partner for life.
Right.
I don't believe that. People do it and you can make it work, but it's just going to be so hard. And this is why you have people referring to marriages as World War II, war of the sexes and all of this, because people tell you you're getting married, you're going, it's a prison.
Right.
Exactly, et cetera, et cetera. And so what this whole, this model that we created is a faith-based model. It's this idea that don't rush into this, and God has someone for you. And people will always ask questions like, wait, are you saying there's just one person for me? What if that one person is, someplace? Well, my answer to that is, how many people do you want to marry? You just want the one, right? What do you care if there are others? You just want one. Right. And I believe that God is a gatherer. He says he's the one that calls the person that he needs from a far country. So no matter where this person is, something is going to happen. You're going to move around. That person is going to move, and you're going to come face to face with each other. But here's the problem.
There's always a problem.
And that's where the trauma comes in. Is if your eyes are not open. And I'm talking about your physical eyes. The eyes to which we see things. Your inner eye, if they're not open, that person could be sitting right next to you and you will not recognize them. I was at and this has happened several times. I was at this meeting, this conference, and it was a Christian conference, and I was speaking, and there was somebody playing on the keyboardist. And I saw the keyboardist, and I saw the lead praise singer, and I thought, wow, those two just flows. Like this is like. So I made inquiries because I'm always trying to match my people. So I made inquiries, and then they've been friends since elementary school or something. They were friends. So I called the girl because I know her. I said, wait, why are you just friends? There's something going on here. She was like, oh, no, we're friends, and I can't marry my friend. And I hear things like that. Like, who do you want to marry?
The enemy? Right.
Like, why wouldn't you marry your friend?
Right.
You know, long story short, the guy wanted to marry her, but she didn't want it, and he ended up marrying somebody else. But these are the things I'm talking about. Like, maybe they were perfect fits. Maybe they were supposed to be together, right? But she couldn't see for one reason or the other. He's going to marry somebody else. She's going to marry somebody else. They're going to, struggle in their different relationships. So here is the plan. That God doesn't make any mistakes.
Right.
That God has a plan for everything. He designed this world. He designed our body. So there's a design for marriage too. There's a design for coupling. There's a design for relationship. But when trauma comes, what happens when you experience those things in life, mostly in our childhood, and you're set on a course of a pseudo life, what I call a pseudo living, because once you're in that trauma zones, and I'm going to talk, hopefully we can talk a little bit about that. When you're in those trauma zones, you can't see properly because you're surviving. You're constantly surviving, and when you're surviving, that's all you know to do. Perfect fit is about living in our integrated brain. It's about living in a place of spirit. It's about knowing when Jacob saw his wife, the Bible says that he saw Rachel and they knew it. They knew it. And that's what I'm talking about. That we need to start knowing and seeing instead of just check. Not saying don't have a checklist, but that you can, maybe the person for you is not tall, black, and whatever. Maybe I don't know, maybe there's somebody else. There could be somebody else in Africa somewhere who is working in a place. So you have to be flexible. And when you are in trauma zones, you're not flexible. You're rigid.
Right. Right.
Does this make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Very much so. I think that's how we connected on this, knowing about trauma and working in the area of trauma. And I think it's so important because a lot of people underestimate how their past experiences are impacting the ways that they move now.
Right.
Absolutely.
They are not even aware of how sometimes the abnormal can become normal, right? So even thinking about this idea of not having your eyes open and being able to see, what comes to mind for me is this idea that sometimes folks will, because of their trauma history, be suspicious of niceness and honesty and vulnerability, right? Because the abnormal has become normal. So what feels normal to me, what feels natural, what feels familiar is someone who is dishonest or who is abusive or who ignores me or who's unavailable. So that feels at home and familiar. So I can relax in this, even though I know psychologically, this is not what I want. It feels at home, and someone who's nice and honest and caring and vulnerable and open, that's like, what's wrong with you?
I'm not even going to see that.
Right. I can't see, because you're my friend.
Yeah,
you're too friendly.
You're going to see that. When trauma will actually taint your perspective, your perception and of intimacy. Because when we're talking about intimacy, I always look at it as a trifold thing. You're talking about safety.
Right.
Yes. We're talking about connection. And I'm talking about my ability to lean into you, to just lean into something. And if I can lean into you, my emotions are too messed up or too tied up or too fractured in any way, then it's never going to work. So a lot of people will look for transactional relationships as opposed to intimate relationships. And the reason why, even though they say they want intimacy, they can't handle intimacy because if you're wounded, you're wounded. When you're wounded, it just can't be intimate.
Right.
You want to protect the wound. You want to protect yourself, and you go around just being protective of yourself. So you're not going to get out of the box of your little place because you're afraid of what's out there. Because when we talk about trauma, we talk about fear, distrust. You know, and those things are huge. That means if I don't trust anybody, if I don't trust anyone, how am I going to be in a relationship that God has ordained for a koinonia? Koinonia literally means an intermingling of intimacy that is total and complete. How am I going to have that if I'm afraid? If I don't trust anyone? And so we have, you know, people around here just doing whatever they can and just to make it work. And we're all working too hard. You're working too hard. Like I tell my students, if you're working harder than your client, you're already
You're not doing
crossed the
something
line.
right. Exactly.
You know, so just leave that alone. Let's just leave that alone. And let's see, what should I be doing? But before we talk about that, let's talk about how do you recognize this thing? So if you find that, if you find yourself constantly second guessing everything, number one. Number two, if you find that when it gets close, you sabotage. All right. If you find yourself saying things like, I can do bad all by myself. You know, if you find yourself saying like all men are, all women are, you know, all of those generalizations. If you find that you're constantly elevated, you know, you are, and I mean like you're yelling all the time, you're bitter, all of those things, you are in trauma zones, right? And when it comes to relationships, if you find that you end up causing the conflict, or you're in relationships that there's always drama. Somebody's always doing something, or you're doing this. If that's you, there's no judgments. It's just the day you, in Nigeria, there's a saying, in the Igbo, they say, the day you wake up is your morning. The day you wake up is your morning. So it basically just means that don't worry about what happened when you were asleep. The day you wake up, you start there. All right. So it's not a judgment. We're not like, you know, no, this just means that if you're that person, maybe today after the show, you can decide that I want to do something differently in my relationships. Because God wants a joyful, look, relationship, this is about covenant. This is where the DNA of God is supposed to be. Because what's supposed to happen is you and your husband, you know, you come together in this loving, divine way, and you raise kids in there, and then you go forth and do the work of the kingdom. But if I'm constantly fighting with you, if we can't fit, you know, then what happens? We get distracted, and the kids get wounded, and then the cycle continues.
And goes on and on. This is, there's so much, you know, so much information. And when we were talking earlier and you were talking about, you know, the perfect fit, I started thinking about, you know, singles, of course. But then as I listened to you talk more and more, you have really addressed something that's so key that very few people really stop to pay attention to. And that is recognizing this trauma zone. Like people are engaging in behavior and probably not even, I think, not recognizing their trauma as well as not even acknowledging it. And so, but I'm also hearing you talk about just how couples are, you know, in relationships, and there's this connection. So my question is, while there's a lot of work, and it sounds like your focus is on the work for singles, would you say the same for perhaps people who are in relationships and probably still experiencing some trauma, would that also be like a threat to this intimacy that they're experiencing?
Absolutely. We're talking about married couples, right?
Right.
When you look, if you haven't addressed your traumas, you come into the marriage, it's still there.
Right. And
it's still there,
magnified.
which is why a lot of couple counseling doesn't really work if you don't look at the traumas. That's what they're bringing in. Because a lot of the times, I believe that it's not about the communication and the finances, because the ones we tell them, it's, you have to learn how to be, even in church, they'll say you have to be respectful, you have to be this. I don't think that's the biggest deal. The biggest deal is if the wife, for example, let's say they've experienced some type of sexual assault growing up, all right? Or if they were abandoned as a child. And I don't mean abandoned even in physical abandonment.
Right.
I mean that a parent who was not present.
Right.
All right. Now, that person adapted to their world in their own way, because surviving sometimes doesn't look nice. It could be manipulating, it could be lying, it could be prostitute, it could be anything. All right, but you survive, you survive. And then you meet somebody and then you get married, right? All those things don't then go away.
No, they don't.
Because marriage should be about healing the wounds of childhood. Right, but we don't usually do those things, right? And so the first sexual experience might be good and things like that, or they pretend, but then about a year or two, they're like, I don't have to do anything, I just don't like you touching me.
Right.
See, you take that to counseling, and we're now talking about sexual, counseling. How do you? But the problem, the exposure, it was what? Was the rape, was the assault, and that needs to be taken care of.
Right.
So a lot of people don't tell their spouses what happened because they don't think there is an impact on the current relationship.
Right.
Or what people tell me is, Doc, I know what you're talking about, but I can't go down that rabbit hole because if I do, I'll never come out.
Right. Right. And even as you're saying that, what occurred to me was, as we talk about, like a lot of people don't tell, it's even magnified when it's a man who's been sexually assaulted in childhood.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times they've never disclosed to anyone and don't disclose to their spouse. And because there's such a, number one, a stigma around it. Number two, we don't like to think about that in our culture, in American culture, that it happens to boys. So, a lot of times when we say sexual abuse in childhood, most people go to the wife.
Absolutely.
Being the survivor of that. But there's so many men who were boys who were sexually assaulted by women, by men, and they've never told anyone, and they bring that into the relationship or into the marriage, and it may impact them sexually. Also, as you mentioned, the trust, the vulnerability, the fear of allowing someone in or to know that, because how they might respond or react, how they might see them, there's shame, there's guilt. All of those things are there. And if what you're doing is trying to teach them how to hold hands more to build that, it's going to land flat. It's not going to do anything.
It's not going to work.
Yeah, it's not going to do anything.
So we need to start getting healed. That's what I've been doing for the past few years here. It's just allowing people to, informing people that there is another way.
Yes.
Emotional healing is of God. Just as God heals us physically, He wants to heal us emotionally.
Right.
The scripture that says, is there no balm in Gilead?
Yeah.
Is there no balm here? Are there no doctors? Is there nobody to heal my people? And I think people are really suffering from this right now. They're being, it's not just about childhood traumas. There are all types of traumas.
Right.
Domestic violence, even churches, have hurt people, all kinds of things like that. And so we need to start healing and stop hiding.
Right.
God wants to heal every part of us so that we can be whole. And this is what it's about. So for the couples that you asked, they need to do the work. Find somebody that you can talk to and do the work. Sometimes you have to do it individually and then do it as a couple. but healing trauma is treatable.
Yes.
It's not a death sentence.
Right.
You know, and this whole idea that God can use anybody, and it doesn't matter how messed up you are in your relationship, God can turn this whole thing around.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just, you know how you say this in churches, God can turn things around. I say those are Christianese.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I'm talking about. That you need to do the work.
Yes.
You know, like
Yes.
don't just say God is going to turn it around. Like find that therapist,
Right.
find that counselor, find
Right.
that coach, somebody that can do the work with you,
Right.
so that you can be healed,
Yes.
Right.
so that you can be perfectly fitted.
Perfectly fitted. That's the public service announcement.
Right, exactly.
That's the public service
Exactly.
announcement. Exactly.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
So understanding the healing needs to occur and people need to find the right resources to help that to happen. What are some steps that singles can take to get prepared, to be open to be ready for finding that perfect fit that, as you mentioned, God has created?
That's great. You know, number one, I think the first thing that needs to happen is make sure that you are self-aware. And I tell people, you need to take a minute to know yourself. Every single thing that has happened in your life, those things are relevant.
Right.
They're all relevant, and the good and the bad. All right. And I always say this, don't take it all, like don't all of it. Just write it all down or bring it all together and say, this is me. I had somebody who would say, oh, my spirit did this or my flesh did this. And I was like, why are you referring to yourself as if, you know, you're two different, like your flesh and then I'm like, your flesh who lied, that's you. And your spirit who prayed, that's you. It's all you.
Right.
Right. So the first thing is self-awareness. You know, understanding that this happened to you. All right. If you need to get help, then get the help. The other thing I always say is self-compassion.
Yes.
That is important. And when we talk about self-compassion, we're talking about, you know, we don't talk about suffering a lot. A lot of places don't preach it or talk about it because don't worry, be happy. Everybody wants to be happy, and happiness, I have nothing against happiness. We should be happy. But happiness can come and go, you know, it depends. But suffering is coming. So it's happened to all of us. And self-compassion is this whole idea that people always ask things about why me. This self-compassion is we're all involved in this normal adversity. But that, why not you? This is you. This is the human experience.
Right.
It's your humanity. It's a human. Even Jesus suffered.
Yes.
Right. It's your humanity. And so self-compassion means I will not be so hard on myself.
Yes.
Right.
Because of what I did, couldn't do, all of that. No. Self-compassion means, look, I am here, all just the way I am, and I love and I give grace. I don't even want to use the word love. I give grace to myself, because a lot of people you can grant grace to other people, but to you,
Not right.
grace.
Right.
Stop working so, especially, can I talk to black women for a minute?
Yes, yeah.
You know, especially black women, stop working so hard. We're not workhorses. You know, stop, you know, you're strong, the strong black woman. Let me tell you some phrases I want to eliminate. You know, pushing through and pressing through and strong black women. No, not because we don't want to be strong, but what that connotes is we can take everything like beasts of burden.
Right.
That's not who God has made us to be.
Yeah.
Even Jesus said, come to me, all you who
labor,
labor and heavy
right.
laden, and I will give you rest.
That's what he said.
So this is about just, you know, this idea, self-compassion is you can come into your rest zone. That you can say that you are okay. And the places where I'm not okay, I will get the help that I need.
Right.
Right? And then I want to, just stop me anytime. And one of the other things I think that needs to happen is this idea of being flexible, flexibility. Because one thing I've realized is people who are rigid, and trauma will get you into your rigidity. And flexibility is not just about traveling and all of that. That's because you can do the acts and not be flexible emotionally or psychologically. I mean, I have a friend who travels everywhere, But let a man go talk to her. She freezes up. Because of her traumas. So emotional flexibility and psychological flexibility and emotional adaptability.
Yeah.
Those two things you need to cultivate. Find how you're going to do that.
Yeah.
Cultivate that. And that means that I can be flexible to experience some things beyond my comfort zone.
Right.
Because your husband or your wife might not be in this United States. Or they could be in the United States. But you need to be flexible enough. If you something in you, and I don't want to say God this and God that because those are Christianese. If something in you just tells you, go register for that conference at a certain place. Right. Now, the rigidity will be like, oh no, that doesn't fit my schedule and da 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 da. But if you're walking this place that I'm talking about, in this space that we're talking about, you will register for that conference and you will go to that conference. And you don't like really talking to people that much, but because you're practicing flexibility and adaptability, you're going to go sit at a table that is uncomfortable, right? And then you're talking. And then you're talking. Yeah. And then you're talking. You see what I'm saying? You're talking and you're like, okay, at the end of the day, maybe we can exchange phone numbers. Right. Because I strongly believe that God is the biggest matchmaker. He will bring, it's a gatherer. It will bring people together, right? We just need to be able to be flexible enough to be where you're supposed to be.
I completely agree with that. I'm always like, unless you're trying to marry the Amazon delivery driver, he's not coming to your house. Exactly. Right? You have to get out. And one of the things that we've been talking about in this season of episodes is really this idea about connecting in relationships, with friendships, supportive relationships, work relationships, intimate relationships, that we have to, some of the things that you said, we have to practice vulnerability. What is one of the, a common saying now is growth happens just outside your comfort zone. So if you stay in your comfort zone and what feels comfortable for you, growth is not happening. Right. The other thing that I want to highlight that you said was, as you talked about self-awareness, I'm always like, insight is sexy. Insight is sexy. Yes, it is. You worried about your hair, your clothes, and what you bring in and how you walk in. No, be self-reflective and be able to say, oh, I see me, I like me, but I'm going to change some of these things. And this is how I move in relationships. Like, that draws people to you. That makes people want to be around you because they see that you know and have an understanding of how you're moving in the room, in relationships with people. So you're not walking through or having relationships like a bull in a china shop, just bumping up, being triggered all over the place, emotional dysregulation, not knowing why, firing off and popping off and all of that. All of this is wonderful. I want to know, because this is your latest book, Sunset Street. Sunset Street. Okay, so the premise, which is the first book, and we're going to talk about this at the end, but is The Perfect Fit, which is kind of more of a program or structure. And then Sunset Street, as you mentioned, is your first fiction book. Tell us the plot of it. Tell us the plot right quick.
All right, quickly. So, my baby, right there. So it's Ade and Ali. These are two, they met when they were younger, I mean, in childhood. Developed a great friendship and just a connection there. And of course, life happens. Yes. And the male went to Harvard, and Ali went to UCLA, lost contact for over 15 years. By the time they came back, Ali had been in a relationship from hell. She married the guy who was off the shelf, good looking, everything. Had everything you wanted to list, he had it. He fit, it fit the box. And she married Richard, and it was hell. They came back together 15 years later.
Don't tell all the ending now. You got to leave a cliffhanger.
Yeah, it's not the end.
Okay.
They came back together, and and Sunset Street, I have to say what that means. Why was Sunset Street? That's the street they grew up in San Bernardino. Okay. It was Sunset Street. That was where healing happened for a whole bunch of people. So it wasn't just Ali. It was also Ali and her friends who grew up in this, and it's all about growing up there and then becoming who you're supposed to be. That's what that book is about.
Wow.
I'm so excited for the book.
Amazing. I know. It sounds good. Okay. So we have a read. Okay. We could sit here and talk all morning, all afternoon, and all evening.
Yes.
But our time has come to a close. I want to thank you so much for joining us. You have dropped a lot of nuggets of wisdom that I'm sure that our audience can take with them as they're thinking about, are they ready?
Right.
Where is their perfect fit? Are their eyes open to even, to even see it? So we always leave our viewers with a resource. You've brought your 2 books with you today. Where can they find them?
Anywhere books are sold. Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, online.
So Sunset Street is the fiction book, and then this is
the program.
A perfect fit. It's
Model.
a program model. It's a model. So for singles.
For singles, but anybody can get it.
Anybody.
Yeah, I tell parents, read it so that you can,
Help your children.
help your children.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you can find these on Amazon, helping you to think about how to get yourself ready for a relationship, and then reading Sunset Street so you can see how Allie and Addie struggled to, I don't know the end, so I can't tell you what they struggled to do, but they did something, y'all. They did something. So thank you so much for being here. Now, you always can also go to our website, normalizehelp.org. We'll make sure that both of these books are on our website for easy clicking there. So thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you. And you know that, as always, we pray that you are living well. For more information and resources, be sure to check us out at normalizehelp.org. And you can always email us at livingwell@faithfamily.org to get a question answered or to tell us a story. You never know, your question might make it to air or be the subject of one of our episodes. See you next week.
It's not too late to change, it's time to be the change. It's time to shine that light that lives in you. It's not too late to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, now it's time to change. Now it's time to change, time to change, time to change.